You mentioned prevention. Let's talk about prevention because prevention is about catching the early signs. And then you covered it. Okay, so these are, we're going to call them, like Angela does in the book, prodromes. So prodromes are noticing and observing the early signs and preventing a full migraine onset, flare-up. Is it a flare-up?
Right. Well, it's an onset. So it's not really a flare-up. It's like an onset. It's when the actual migraine will start. And so you can have a prodrome 2 days prior to a migraine, or you can have it just a minute before a migraine. So it depends upon the prodrome. So you have to be ready and pay attention to anything. It's quite difficult. I would say that 99% of the migraineurs don't know what their prodromes are. And by the time they're catching them, it's too late. So the prodromes that you want to catch are, for example, what we found in the group was fascinating. My husband, of course, I've been married now for 49 years. And so he's known my face. We've been together for 51 years. Okay. So he knows my face, right? And he used to tell me, you have a migraine face. And I said, what is a migraine face? I didn't know. This was like 10, 15 years ago. I said, what is a migraine face? And he says, I don't know, but it's different. And so it took some time. We figured out that one of my eyes, my right eye, which I don't have symmetrical eye completely. This is always somewhat different, but it would be like this. I'm trying to, like tortoise, sort of kind of close off. That would be my face before a migraine. It would be like this, sort of kind of, that I would not be able to open that eye. And I never noticed it because I'm looking at my face and it's always the same to me, right? I'm looking in the mirror and it's nothing different. And he just realized that something was different, but he didn't know what it was. And it took some working out, taking photos, whatever. Finally figured out, this eye gets smaller before a migraine. So I already had my group because on my first edition of the book, I already wrote about this. And in a Facebook migraine group, I mentioned this. And then we took a survey, and just about everybody has it, but they just didn't notice it. So people kept on putting their selfies in. I said, wow, look at me. Do I have this? Is this what you mean? And kept on doing it. And they would put in 2, 3 photos, like this is when they don't have it. This is when they have it. And so it appears to be a universal migraine prodrome, that one eye becomes smaller than the other, or smaller than it used to be otherwise, for the time of before the migraine occurs. And so this is probably associated with the lack of salt. So the muscles are not working from the instructions from the brain are not coming to open this eye. I haven't found a better explanation for that. So that's possibly the reason. So this is one symptom that nearly all of us have. It's really amazing that we do. Another prodrome that most of us have is that we will urinate a lot more because we have an electrolyte imbalance. And the kidney wants to balance. So we're going to urinate because the kidney wants to bring it to balance. And our urine is not going to have the proper color. So the proper color would be like a light lemonade kind of a color. And when we urinate, it's going to be clear, like almost transparent. That means you're just dumping water because you don't have enough electrolyte and your kidneys are trying to recycle your sodium. Another one, of course, is nausea, vomiting, dizziness. Some people have aura. Of course, most migraineurs have some visual disturbances that are not called aura. They're symptomatic stachoma, but I call them aura because nearly all of us have something. They could be like, I love my fireworks. They like, phew, it's like, but just in one eye, mine are blue and just shine up like fireworks. It's really pretty. Or like in the middle of the night, I may get a flashlight like hitting somebody from behind. And I wake up and said, was this a lightning or something? Then I realized it was just a flash in one eye. Usually the eye that gets smaller. And then I know that is a migraine prodrome. So you may have a lot of prodromes. And so while you have these prodromes, when you have them, if you then take a salt test. So the salt test is you take a very little amount of salt and put it under your tongue. Just don't drink, don't talk, just put a little salt under your tongue. And it's going to absorb, and it will go directly into your blood circulation and into your brain, in your mouth. And if you find a prodrome lessening, then take more salt. if your prodrome increases, that means you need potassium. So hat for the coconut powder, coconut water powder, or eat an avocado if you eat plants, or eat fish, or eat steak. These are the high potassium food items. If there's no change, then I call it the hit it with both. So get a food like a big steak, salt it properly, and eat that. And now you also need to know what you ate before, because if you ate carbohydrates, you don't want to have water and salt for carbohydrates, because what does carbohydrate do? As glucose enters the cells, it removes sodium and water. So if you take sodium and water, you already have a lot of sodium and water in you, just not in your cells. So you can't bring the sodium back, but you can bring the water back if you take salt. So then you just take salt and the water. And it's going to bring, that's what I did today when I had those big things. I just had salt and it pulled everything back. And so it's fantastic. So you can totally prevent everything if you observe your environment, you know what you ate, keep records of what you are eating, because when you have a migraine, you're going to forget. You won't be able to think back of what you ate 5 minutes ago, let alone a night ago. You have to go back about 24 hours to see what you ate and drank to evaluate why you have a migraine. Look at also the weather. If there's a weather change, look at your period, the cycle, look at if there's full moon, look at if there's any stress, if you are sick or about to become sick, or somebody else is sick. So all these factors count in, and you will have to adjust what you do based on understanding your circumstance.
Another prodrome you mentioned, I think this was under prodromes, was the temporary paralysis. That's scary. What kind of paralysis are we talking about? Like full, like stroke?
It's a stroke type paralysis, half of your body, and that's a hemiplegic migraine. So it can be, I mean, when I had people coming into the group, joining the group, we ask them that if they are hemiplegic migraineurs, they have to send me a private message, because oftentimes they get the hemiplegic migraine and a spouse or a friend is going to contact me, what do I do? And so I like to be on with them right away. And so what I find is that unlike a regular migraine, with a hemiplegic migraine, they always need salt, without exception. So I had a migrainer once who was in the hospital. She collapsed. She was a elementary school teacher. She was a hemiplegic migrainer, and she collapsed in the bathroom. And they found her. She was completely out. And they took her to the hospital, to the emergency. She was completely out. They thought she had a stroke, but then they checked her, and they discovered that she doesn't have a stroke, so it must be a migraine. And they were trying to give her all kinds of medications, and the husband said no. And this was in another country. This was actually in Taiwan. And the husband said no, and he sent me a message. What do I do? I said, put salt into her mouth. So he ran out, and there's no salt in Taiwan. So he had to run to get a little packet of salt and just poured it into her mouth, under her tongue. And within half an hour, they snuck out of the hospital. She was completely fine, completely recovered.
Okay, so blurred vision, urine color, now the odors. Is that, we're talking about body?
Any odor.
Oh.
No, any odor. So anything that we smell. So it could be like an air freshener, cologne, anything whatsoever. So our body odor is not necessarily, but if I'm with you and you have a body odor, I may get a migraine from that, because it overstimulates.
Right. So tingling in the face, hands and feet.
That's typical for hemiplegic migraines. So I'm not a hemiplegic migrainer, but I sometimes get tingling in one arm. And so this is also important, as we talked about migraine types, is that everybody can have any kind of a migraine. And so a migraine is really dependent on the type of migraine. Is really like hemiplegic, just means it is affecting a brain region that affects the muscles. And so you can't stand up, you become paralyzed on one side. But the same effort, this migraine can be, for example, in the speech, the Broca area, when that just means you can't speak. Or it could be in the visual cortex, which means you're going to end up with an aura. So depending upon where the migraine is located, the symptoms will differ. So the migraine is always the same. It doesn't matter if it is where it is at, the symptoms will differ, but the same migraine regardless. And so the treatment isn't different. They're always the same treatment because they're all the same things. So the tingling means a hemiplegic migraine is about to come. So it can be I had tingling in my arm and in my leg. And so I knew it was a hemiplegic migraine, but I never had a hemiplegic migraine before. And of course, I prevented it, so it never happened. But this was an unusual symptom for me. So anybody can have any kind of migraine at any given time.